She was 23 years old, though the harsh desert life had worn her far beyond what her age should have shown. Her wrists throbbed painfully where the rope had been digging into her skin, and her bare feet burned against the wooden platform beneath her. A thick layer of dust clung to her dress, which was gray and torn. The fabric stiffened with dried blood from the night she had fought back and lost. Men filled the square around her, ranchers with sharp, calculating eyes, and merchants with deliberate, careful hands, men who could smell profit the way buzzards could smell heat rising from the earth. They leaned in close, assessing her value without ever bothering to meet her gaze. The auctioneer cleared his throat and launched into his practiced speech about debts and vagrancy and contracts, words designed to turn human beings into property. He grabbed Eliza by the chin to put her teeth on display. She wrenched her head away hard enough to make him stumble backward. Laughter rippled through the crowd. She didn't so much as flinch. She stared straight ahead and committed every face to memory. "Who will start the bidding?" the auctioneer called out. Strong, healthy. 1 year of labor to settle the fine. Silence answered first. Then a number came. Then a lower one. Each bid scraped something raw and tender inside her chest. She didn't cry. She wouldn't allow it. A man in a sweat-darkened vest cracked a crude joke, and another nearby laughed too eagerly. Eliza felt the full weight of it pressing down on her. Not the numbers themselves, but the ease of it all. Then a voice sliced through the noise of the square. Calm, low, certain. $1. Laughter erupted, loud and sharp. Men turned to look. Some sneered, others simply blinked in confusion. The speaker stood at the edge of the crowd, tall, broad-shouldered. His clothes were plain: canvas trousers, a faded blue shirt, boots worn thin from long miles of walking. He wasn't grinning. He wasn't posturing. He just stood there, as steady and unmoving as a fence post sunk deep in the ground. The auctioneer scoffed. "That's not a real bid." "It is," the man replied simply. "You asked." Another bidder protested. Rules were argued back and forth. The auctioneer sputtered. The man never raised his voice. He didn't need to. "I'll take the contract," he said, "for $1. The crowd erupted again. Someone called him a fool. Someone else muttered that loneliness did strange things to a man. Eliza watched him closely, not with hope, but with caution. She had learned the difference between the two the hard way. The auctioneer sneered. "And what exactly would you do with her?" The man looked up then, finally locking eyes with Eliza. There was no hunger in his gaze, no cold calculation, only recognition, as if he could see the full shape of who she was standing on that platform and had chosen not to look away. "Free her," he said. The sound seemed to drop out of the world entirely. Even the wind paused. The auctioneer blinked. "That's not even legal," he started. "It is," the man said quietly. A murmur spread through the crowd, uneasy, reluctant. Truth had a way of doing that to people. The man reached into his pocket and held up a silver dollar. It caught the sunlight and flashed clean and bright. "Do we have a deal?" he asked. The auctioneer hesitated, then snatched the coin as if it burned his fingers. Papers changed hands. A pen scratched out a signature, and before anyone could stop him, the man tore the contract cleanly in two, then tore it again. The pieces drifted down into the dirt. Eliza's breath caught hard and painful in her chest. The man climbed the steps of the platform toward her. Not fast, not slow. He stopped an arm's length away. "May I?" he asked, nodding toward the ropes binding her wrists. Nobody had asked her anything like that in a very long time. She swallowed and gave a single nod. His hands were rough, but careful as he worked through the knots. No pulling, no rushing. When the rope finally fell away, her arms trembled. She flexed her fingers slowly, as if she were relearning how they worked. "Can you walk?" he asked. She nodded again. "Then walk," he said. "Don't look back." Eliza stepped down from the platform. Each footfall felt strange, almost unreal. The crowd parted around her, some muttering, some staring. She walked through them with her head high and her hands free. The man fell into step beside her, close enough to act as a shield, but far enough away to give her space. At the edge of the square, her knees buckled without warning. She caught herself on a hitching post, her breath finally shaking loose. "Why?" she demanded, the question sharp with fear. "What is it you want from me?" He looked out toward the open land stretching beyond the town. Red earth, endless sky. "My name is Thomas Avery," he said. "I don't want anything from you." She let out a single bitter laugh. "Men don't do things like that for nothing." Thomas nodded slowly. "I had a sister," he said. "That was all he offered at first. It was enough. They took her," he went on, "years ago. By the time I tracked her down, I was already too late." Eliza felt her anger drain away, leaving something hollow and heavy in its place. "When I saw you up there," he said, finally meeting her eyes again, "I recognized what being too late looks like. I wasn't going to let that happen a second time." She studied his face carefully, searching for the lie. She found none. "I don't have anywhere to go," she said finally. "I've got a ranch," he replied, "east of here. Small, hard land, but there's a room with no strings attached." She held his gaze for a long moment, then gave a quiet nod. They rode out of Mercy Wells under a sky that burned white with heat. About a mile down the road, a voice called out from behind them, cruel and full of warning. "You'll regret it," a man shouted. "That woman's nothing but trouble." Thomas didn't turn around. "The only thing I regret," he said evenly, "is not getting there sooner." Eliza faced forward, her heart hammering as the town fell away behind them and the desert opened wide ahead. She had no idea what was waiting at the end of this road, but for the first time in years, it would be her own choice to find out. The ride lasted 3 hours. Eliza counted every one of them. The land stretched out empty and honest around them, scrub and stone beneath a sky that offered no apologies. Thomas rode a few paces ahead, staying quiet, letting the steady rhythm of the horses settle what words couldn't. He checked on her without staring, slowed their pace whenever her hands stiffened on the reins, and said nothing when she winced. At a shallow spring, he dismounted and offered her water. She drank like someone relearning what it meant to trust. The cold shocked her teeth. She welcomed it. They didn't speak again until the ranch came into view. A low house, a leaning barn, a windmill ticking away like a tired old clock. "This is it," Thomas said simply. To him it might not have been much. To Eliza, it felt like everything. Inside, the house was clean and spare. 1 table, 2 chairs, a stove blackened by years of steady use. 2 doors. Thomas opened one and stepped aside without a word. "That room is yours," he said. "It locks." That was the first thing she noticed. The bolt. The simple, solid promise of it. When he left her alone, she slid the bolt home and leaned her back against the door, shaking. The room was small, but the bed was clean. There was a basin, a pitcher, and a window fitted with real glass. She washed the grit and dust from her skin, then stood looking at her wrists, raw, bruised, and free. That night, they ate together in quiet. Bread, meat, water. He told her she could eat more. She didn't. Sleep came hard, and when it finally arrived, it brought dreams she had no names for. Morning brought coffee. She woke to the smell of it and to a single wildflower standing in a tin cup on her windowsill. Purple, delicate, unexplained. Eliza touched it carefully, as though it might vanish at any moment. Days passed, and work filled every one of them. Thomas taught without commanding. Fence posts, feed, water, how to move with the land rather than fight against it. He never asked about her past. He never stood too close. He never stepped into her room. She found herself waking earlier each day, watching him mend tack by lamplight, sitting with her coffee in the quiet before dawn. The peace of it felt almost dangerous. On the 7th day, a rider appeared at noon. Eliza spotted him first, a single figure moving fast through the dust on the horizon. Thomas went still. His hand moved to his belt. "Inside," he said. She didn't argue, but she reached for the rifle from its place on the wall and positioned herself where she could see without being seen. The rider pulled up short of the fence, young, nervous. He tipped his hat. "Mr. Avery," he called. "My name's Luke Barton. I ride for Calvin Ross." Eliza's stomach tightened hard at that name. Thomas's voice stayed level. "What does Ross want?" "He's asking about a woman," Luke said. "One taken from an auction. People are starting to ask questions." Thomas took a measured step forward. "Is Ross suddenly concerned about women's welfare?" Luke flushed. "I'm just delivering a message." "Then deliver this," Thomas said. "Eliza Reed is a free woman. She stays here by her own choice. Anyone who decides to bother her answers to me." Luke hesitated. "There's talk, sir." "There always is," Thomas replied. Luke gave a short nod and rode away. That night, Eliza couldn't sleep. She stood in the doorway. "They'll keep coming," she said. Thomas looked up from the table. "Maybe you shouldn't have to keep paying for my trouble." He set his cup down carefully. "You're not trouble," he said. The words landed deep, heavy, and a little dangerous. The visits didn't stop. Men rode through with excuses thin as dust, their eyes always measuring. On the 10th day, Eliza said it out loud. "Maybe I should go." Thomas went very still. "Is that what you want?" he asked. "I don't want to be the reason you lose what you've built here," she said. He met her gaze directly. "Nothing I've built here matters if it costs someone their dignity." She stayed. The town did not forgive it. When they went in together for supplies, the looks followed them everywhere. The whispers cut. A woman spat a name at Eliza, one she had worn before, and shed. Thomas stepped between them without a word, quiet and absolute. The ride home was silent. That night, Eliza lay awake listening to the house breathe around her, to Thomas pacing in the next room, to her own heart refusing to be cautious. She knew it then. She loved him, and she hated herself for it. It happened 3 weeks later. A man arrived in the dead of night, desperate, bleeding fear into the darkness. He brought a girl with him, 16 years old, bruised, half gone. "They're hunting her," the man said. "Bounty hunters. The papers say she belongs to a house in Tucson." Thomas didn't hesitate for a second. "Bring her in." Eliza took charge immediately, cleaned wounds, whispered steady reassurances, and saw herself reflected back in the girl's hollow eyes. Her name was Rose. They worked through the entire night, barricaded doors, loaded rifles, drawing lines in dust and in conscience. At dawn, riders appeared, 5 of them, armed, confident. Thomas stood on the porch. "You're not taking her." The leader smiled like he'd been waiting specifically to hear those words. "The law says otherwise." Eliza watched from the loft, heart hammering. She could read the math written in the men's eyes. They rode away with a promise to return. That night, they made plans. Rose couldn't stay here, not with hunters circling. "We run," the man said. "No," Eliza said. "We create a distraction." Thomas turned to her sharply. "No," she repeated, meeting his gaze evenly. They don't know her face. Not anymore. Silence stretched between them. "I can buy her the time she needs," Eliza said. Thomas's voice broke slightly. "I will not trade one life for another. I'm making a choice," she said, "just like you did." The plan took shape like a wound, ugly but necessary. At dusk, Rose slipped away hidden in a wagon heading west. Eliza stayed behind. When the riders came back, they found her, hands bound again, sitting astride a horse, the dark outline of the ranch receding behind her. She caught Thomas's eye once as they rode her away. "Don't follow," she tried to say with her face. "Come for me," she meant. The desert closed in around her. Hooves pounded the earth. Somewhere behind her a promise was already taking shape. She whispered it to the darkness. Please be on time. The men rode hard through the night. Eliza quickly learned how pain changes its shape when you've had time to prepare for it. The rope burned her wrists. The saddle rubbed her raw. Fear pressed in from all sides like the heat itself. But beneath it all, a steady current of resolve kept running through her. She counted every turn in the trail, tracked the stars overhead, memorized the shapes of rocks, felt the way the land sloped beneath the horse's hooves. She would not disappear quietly. They stopped near dawn in a narrow cut of stone where the wind couldn't reach. The men laughed too loud among themselves, passed a bottle around, argued about money. Eliza stayed silent with her head bowed, letting them believe she was smaller than she actually was. The leader, a thick-necked man with a scar running down his cheek, crouched in front of her as the light came up. "You don't look 16, he said. Eliza swallowed hard. "They make you old fast," she replied. He grabbed her wrist and turned it over, studying the calluses and the scars. Something shifted behind his eyes. By mid-morning, his suspicion had sharpened into certainty. "She's not the girl," he said to the others. "We've been played." The blow came fast. White light, blood flooding her mouth. Eliza didn't scream. "Where is she?" he snarled. Eliza smiled at him through her broken breath. Gone. That smile cost her dearly, but it was worth every bit of it. They turned back toward the ranch. Thomas Avery had not waited for certainty. The moment the dust settled behind the riders, he moved. He saddled 2 horses, grabbed rifles, water, rope. He didn't pack carefully. He packed fast. An older ranch hand named Caleb met him at the fence. Gray beard, steady hands. "I'm coming," Caleb said. Thomas nodded once. That was all that needed to be said. They followed the trail Eliza had left without quite meaning to. A torn strip of cloth here, a scuffed stone there. Marks that only someone who understood loss would ever think to look for. "She's alive," Caleb said quietly as they rode. "I know," Thomas replied. They rode on until night swallowed the land around them. The canyon was a scar cut deep into the earth. The men had chosen it well. High ground, a narrow passage in, no easy way through. Eliza was tied to a juniper at the bottom, her wrists numb, her face swollen. She kept her eyes open and listened. She heard Thomas before she ever saw him. The first shot cracked the air open, then another, then chaos. The men scattered, shouted, fired blind into the shadows. Thomas moved like a storm that had been building for years, finally breaking. He didn't shout, didn't posture. He advanced with quiet purpose, every step deliberate and measured. Caleb flanked left, steady and precise. Eliza worked the rope with fingers slick from blood and grit, slowly, carefully. A man slipped down the rock face toward her, young and obviously nervous. She didn't hesitate. The stone fit her hand as if it had been made for it. When his rifle hit the dirt, she picked it up and climbed. The rim above erupted into noise and smoke. Men fell. Rocks shattered. The air filled with the smell of iron and dust. Eliza spotted Thomas pinned behind a boulder, reloading fast. A man rose up behind him, lifting his rifle. She aimed. The recoil nearly knocked her clean off her feet. The man dropped. Thomas turned. Their eyes met across the chaos. Everything they hadn't yet said to each other lived in that one look. Then the leader charged, both pistols out, rage naked on his face. Eliza's rifle jammed. Thomas stepped forward with empty hands. They collided hard, fists, bone, the breath knocked out of both of them. The leader got his hands around Thomas's throat and squeezed. Eliza screamed his name. Thomas drove his thumb into the man's eye and rolled free. He didn't stop until the man stopped moving. Silence fell hard and sudden. Caleb bound the survivors. Thomas staggered. Eliza reached him first. "You came," she said. "Always," he answered. They rode back slowly, wounded but alive. The ranch came into view under a pale morning sky. It looked smaller now somehow, but also stronger. Thomas helped Eliza down from the horse. She leaned into him without thinking about it. He held her like it was instinct, not a choice, but a reflex. "I thought I'd lost you," he said into her hair. "You didn't," she replied. "You were on time." That night, by the soft flickering of the lantern light, Thomas finally said the words he'd been carrying since the auction block. "I love you." Eliza laughed and cried at the same time. "I've loved you since the flower," she admitted. "I was just too afraid to say it." "Me too," he said. They didn't rush anything after that. They sat together, held hands, and let the truth settle around them like dust after a long ride. News moved fast. The hunters were arrested. Papers were questioned. Laws bent, and then they broke. Rose was safe. A letter arrived weeks later, postmarked California. A new name, a new life. Spring crept slowly into the land. One morning, Thomas stood on the porch holding a small wooden box. "No contracts," he said. "No debts, just a choice." Eliza smiled, fierce and absolutely certain. Yes. The desert watched as they made their promises to walk forward together. Not saved, not owned, chosen. And every morning after that, something small waited on the windowsill. A flower, a stone, a quiet reminder that he had chosen her, and that she chose him right back. Peace never arrives all at once. It comes in pieces, quiet ones, fragile ones. After the canyon, the ranch felt different. Not necessarily safer, just more awake to itself. Eliza healed slowly. Bruises faded from purple to yellow, then to memory. Her wrists scabbed, split, and finally closed over. Thomas watched without hovering, though she could feel his attention like a steady hand at her back. He cooked on the mornings she slept too long. He left water by the door when the heat climbed. He never asked what hurt. He just noticed. Caleb stayed on for a few days, long enough to help with repairs, and longer still to make sure the land had truly settled. Before he left, he pulled Thomas aside. "You drew a line," the old man said. "Men like Ross don't forget lines." Thomas nodded. "Neither do I." The words weren't brave ones. They were tired, but they were true. They returned to their work, fences, windmill, stock. The simple rhythm of it grounded them both. Eliza learned the land the way you learn a scar, slowly, with respect. Some nights, she woke shaking. Thomas never crossed the threshold of her room. Instead, he would sit on the floor just outside it and wait until her breathing steadied, sometimes speaking her name softly, sometimes saying nothing at all. In town, Mercy Wells buzzed with talk. People watched them more closely now, some with approval, more with judgment. The preacher's wife crossed to the other side of the street to avoid Eliza. A rancher tipped his hat to Thomas and said nothing at all to her. Calvin Ross didn't come himself. He sent word. A folded paper arrived via a courier who wouldn't meet Eliza's eyes. Thomas read it once, then read it again. "They're filing a claim," he said. "For what?" she asked. "Harboring stolen property, obstruction, vigilantism." Eliza let out a short, wrong-sounding laugh. "All words that just mean doing the right thing." "They'll try to make an example out of us," Thomas said. The hearing was set for 2 weeks out. They prepared, not for a fight, but for testimony. Thomas rode out to neighboring ranches. He talked less than he listened. Some doors stayed closed, others opened. Quiet offers of support slipped into his hands like contraband. Eliza stayed back and worked. She cleaned the house, mended shirts, planted a small patch of beans near the windmill. She needed something that grew. One afternoon, she found Thomas sitting on the front porch steps, hat in his hands. "Just say it," she told him. He looked up. "If this goes badly, I'm not leaving." "I know," she said, sitting down beside him, close enough to touch, but not touching. "But I needed to say it out loud." He paused. "I won't let them take you again," he said. "Not by paper or by force." Eliza met his eyes. "I don't want to be protected," she said. "I want to be believed." He nodded slowly. "Then we make them listen." The day of the hearing arrived bright and unforgiving. They rode in together. The room smelled of old wood and sweat and dust. Men packed the benches. Women whispered behind their fans. Ross sat in the front row. Clean shirt, clean hands, ready-made lies. Eliza stood when her name was called. She did not lower her eyes. She told them about the auction, the rope, the numbers called out in the square. She spoke plainly. No tears, no flourishes. Thomas spoke next, about contracts, about law, about what paper allowed men to do to women when nobody chose to push back. A murmur ran through the room. Ross smiled thinly. You interfered with lawful recovery? I interfered with cruelty, Thomas said. The magistrate frowned, asked questions, scribbled notes. Then a woman stood up from the back of the room. Mrs. Klein, a widow, owner of the local laundry. She told them she had watched Eliza being dragged through town in chains weeks before the auction. She told them she had heard the laughter. Then another man stood, then another. The room shifted, not loudly, but enough. The ruling came at dusk. Charges dismissed. Warnings issued. No apology offered. Outside the courthouse, Ross brushed past Thomas and leaned in close. This isn't finished, he said softly. Thomas didn't respond. Eliza did. It is for me, she said. Ross stared at her as if she'd spoken in a foreign language. They rode home under a sky bruised purple and gold. I was scared, Thomas admitted on the way. So was I, Eliza said, but not in the way I used to be. That night he didn't leave a flower on the windowsill. Instead he knocked. She opened the door and waited. I won't step inside unless you ask me to, he said. She reached out and took his hand. Stay. They didn't rush. They sat on the edge of the bed and talked, about nothing, and then about everything. When he finally kissed her, it was careful, as if he was afraid of waking something fragile. Eliza kissed him back, steady and certain. Spring broke the land wide open. Green came where there had been none before. The beans climbed their stakes. The livestock filled out. The windmill stopped its screaming and settled into a steady, contented creak. Eliza laughed more, not often, but genuinely. Thomas smiled more easily. He slept. Then the riders came. 3 of them. Late afternoon, dust rising sharp and fast. Eliza felt it before she could see them. That tightening in the air. Thomas stepped out onto the porch with his rifle slung but clearly visible. The leader raised both hands. We're not here for trouble. You found it all the same, Thomas said. They carried a paper, new seal, new judge, same old intent. Search warrant, the man announced, for stolen property. Eliza's heart kicked hard. You already lost this fight, she said. The man shrugged. Orders changed. Thomas's jaw tightened. He read the paper once, then folded it. You can search, he said, but you won't find what you're looking for. The men dismounted and spread out across the property. Eliza stood in the doorway and watched them walk across her land as if they owned it. One headed for the barn, another toward the house. The third stayed close to Thomas. Too close. Eliza's hand drifted to the knife at her belt. She didn't draw it. Not yet. The search dragged on too long. Drawers were yanked open, chests were kicked, walls were knocked on. Then a shout came from the barn. Found something. Eliza's breath stopped. Thomas moved first. She followed right behind. In the barn, one of the men stood over a crate she had never seen before. Ross's mark was burned into the wood. Thomas stared at it. So, he said quietly, you planted it. The man's smile came quick and ugly. Looks like we did. The third rider reached for his gun. Eliza moved. The rifle cracks split the air like dry wood snapping. Everyone froze. Dust lifted from the barn wall where the bullet had struck, inches above the planted crate. The man who had reached for his weapon cursed and threw himself flat. The others scrambled and shouted over each other, hands flying to their guns. Eliza didn't stop to think. She moved. She shoved Thomas sideways hard enough to throw him off balance and drew her knife in one clean motion. The blade felt familiar. Honest. Down, she said. Another shot rang out, closer this time, tearing splinters from the doorframe. The horses screamed and strained against their ties. Chaos spilled out into the yard. Thomas rolled behind a feed trough and came up with his rifle raised. He didn't fire yet. He searched the ridge above. "Caleb," he murmured. From the rise behind the corral, a gray hat lifted once, and then vanished. The riders hadn't expected real resistance. They had expected fear, paper, and compliance. They had badly misjudged both the land and the people on it. 2 shots came in quick succession, precise and deliberate. One man spun and dropped his gun, clutching a wounded shoulder. Another ducked behind the windmill, his breathing loud with panic. "Callahan!" the leader barked, trying to pull authority back into his voice. "This doesn't have to go this way." Thomas's voice cut back cold and clear. "You planted evidence on my property. That makes you criminals. You can't prove that," the man yelled back. "I can," Eliza said, stepping into plain view with her knife held low and steady. "Because I didn't bring that crate here." "You did." The leader's eyes moved to her, measuring, calculating. "Ma'am," he said, shifting his tone, "step aside." "Step." She didn't move. Another shot cracked from the ridge above. Dirt exploded at the leader's boots. He swore and stumbled backward. "Enough!" he barked to his men. "Fall back!" They dragged the wounded rider toward the horses. One man tried to hoist the crate onto his shoulder. Thomas fired once. The bullet tore the rope right out of the man's hands. "Leave it," Thomas said, "and go." The riders mounted up in a mess of wounded pride and barely contained fear, retreating in a cloud of dust that tasted bitter and unfinished. Silence settled heavy over the yard. Caleb emerged from behind the ridge, rifle slung across his back, face grim. "They won't stop," he said. "They'll come back with more paper, more men." Thomas nodded. "I know." Eliza's hand trembled now that the danger had passed. She slid her knife back into its sheath and leaned against the barn wall, breathing hard. Thomas crossed the space between them and took hold of her shoulders gently. "Are you hurt?" he asked. She shook her head. "I was ready," she said. He studied her face and found something new there. Not fear, not defiance, but choice. That night, none of them slept. They packed quietly and efficiently. Caleb stayed long enough to help load the wagon, then helped burn the crate until nothing was left but ash and truth. Before dawn, he rode east with word for a judge who still remembered the difference between the letter of the law and the spirit of justice. Eliza stood at the window and watched the fire die down. Smoke curled through the room. "They'll say we ran," she said. Thomas set the last sack of grain by the door. "We're not running," she corrected herself. He smiled once, tired, proud. They left at first light. The road south cut through low country and dry stone washes, places where the land had a talent for hiding what it needed to. They traveled slowly and carefully. Thomas taught Eliza to read the sky for coming weather. She showed him how to leave signs in the earth that only the desperate would notice. By the 3rd day, riders were following at a distance. By the 5th, they had closed in. They made camp in a stand of cottonwood trees, where the river bent and the night carried sound far and wide. Eliza felt it before she heard it. Hoofbeats. Too many. Thomas pressed the rifle into her hands without a word. She almost said it then, that she didn't want to be the reason this was happening. "You're not," he said, reading her face. "You're the reason I don't back down." They took their positions. Caleb had taught her well. She breathed. She waited. The men came in loud and confident. Ross rode among them, his coat dusty now, his easy smile gone. "You could have made this simple," Ross called out. "You still can." Thomas stepped forward into the firelight. "You don't get to decide what simple means." Ross's gaze slid to Eliza. "This woman cost you everything," he said. Eliza let out a low, sharp laugh. "No." I gave it back. Ross sneered. "She's trouble." Thomas didn't look at her when he answered. "She's my wife." The word landed between them like a stone dropped into still water. Eliza's heart kicked hard. He hadn't asked. He hadn't warned her. He had simply chosen, out loud, in front of everyone. Ross's face twisted. "You think that changes anything?" "It changes everything," Thomas said. The first shot came from the trees. The fight that followed was fast, brutal, and close. Eliza fired twice and hit once. She felt the impact in her shoulder and kept breathing through it. A man rushed her. She dropped the rifle and met him with the knife, the way survival had taught her. Quick, final. Thomas took a hard blow to the ribs and kept moving, driving Ross back toward the river with controlled, cold fury. Ross slipped on a wet stone and went down hard. Thomas stood over him, breathing ragged, gun raised. "You could end this right now," Ross spat up at him. "Law's still on my side." Thomas lowered his weapon. "No," he said. "It isn't." Caleb's horse thundered in from the darkness. 2 more riders followed behind, lawmen, their badges catching the firelight. Ross went very still. It was over. They returned to the ranch weeks later. The land had been waiting for them. Caleb rode on with their thanks and quiet respect. The papers came through clean at last. No more claims. No more riders showing up with warrants. One morning, Thomas brought Eliza a small box. Inside it lay a simple ring, hammered from silver. "I didn't plan it the right way," he said, "but I'm done waiting." Eliza slipped it onto her finger, hand steady. "Good," she said. "Neither am I." They stood on the porch as the sun rose, the desert stretching wide and unsparing and completely honest before them. Tomorrow would bring work and memory and scars that didn't fade. But today was theirs. And that was enough. The desert has a long memory. Even after the riders were gone, after the law had settled and the dust had fallen back into place, the land still held the echo of everything that had happened. Eliza could feel it in the quiet of early mornings, in the way the wind moved through the grass like a breath, finally, carefully released. They didn't talk much about the fighting. They talked about the work. Thomas was up before dawn again, but now Eliza rose with him. Coffee boiled, bread warmed on the stove, and the small rituals of it stitched their days together. Not grandly, not dramatically, but honestly. She took over the ledger. He repaired the north fence. They argued once about planting too close to the wash, and laughed afterward when the beans came in and proved her right. At night they learned each other slowly. Thomas came to know where her scars pulled tight when storms rolled in. Eliza learned when his silence meant grief and when it meant peace. They didn't rush the healing. They respected it. Word spread anyway. Some neighbors stopped by under the thin excuse of needing to borrow a tool or fix a piece of tack. They didn't say much, just nodded. They left behind jars of honey, sacks of seed, quiet offerings that meant more than any formal apology. Others never came by again. Eliza stopped caring. One afternoon a wagon rolled up carrying a woman with silver threaded through her hair and eyes sharp with deep memory. She stepped down carefully and took both of Eliza's hands in hers, as if she'd been waiting years to do exactly this. "My daughter is alive because of you," the woman said. "I will never forget that." Eliza swallowed and nodded. Words felt too small for the moment. Life didn't become soft after that. It became steady. The ranch survived the summer. Barely, but it survived. Rain came late and mean. The windmill broke twice. Thomas swore at it. Eliza learned to fix it anyway. In October, they stood together in the yard with a small circle of the people who truly mattered to them. No preacher, no blessing from the town, just promises spoken clearly and meant completely. "I won't own you," Thomas said. "I won't cage you. I will walk beside you if you'll have me." Eliza met his eyes without blinking. "I won't make myself small for you. I won't hide my teeth or my scars. But I will choose you every morning I wake up." That was their marriage. They marked it with coffee and bread, and a single wildflower set between them on the table. The first winter hit hard. The cold bit into the house, and old memories bit even harder. Some nights Eliza woke fighting ghosts. Thomas learned to wake without reaching for her, to speak her name quietly until she found her way back to the present. Some nights it was Thomas who woke shaking, with Elena's face pressing close behind his eyes. On those nights, Eliza would sit with him until dawn crept in, her hand steady and warm on his back. They didn't save each other. They stayed. Spring arrived gentler than either of them had expected. The land greened, the beans climbed, the livestock held. Eliza caught herself smiling one morning before she even realized it was happening. One day she came to the windowsill and found it empty. No flower, no stone. She frowned, then laughed softly when she turned and found Thomas standing in the doorway, holding a small wooden box. "I figured it was time," he said. Inside lay a silver dollar, old, worn smooth by many hands and years of history. "It's the same one," he said. "Took some doing to track it down. Cost me far more than it's worth." Eliza took it carefully, her throat tightening. "A reminder," he added, "of what people decided you were worth, and how completely wrong they were." She closed her fingers around it. "Best dollar ever spent," she said. "Best dollar I ever waited too long to use," he replied. Years passed, not quietly, but truly. Women came sometimes, and girls too, sent by whispered, half-believed stories. Eliza never asked many questions. She offered a room, a lock on the door, and time. Thomas fixed fences and kept out of the way unless he was needed. He learned slowly and carefully when to step in front of someone and when to step back. The desert kept its truths. Some of the women who came stayed a while. Some moved on quickly. All of them left stronger than they had arrived. One evening, long after the sun had gone down slow and red, Eliza asked him the question she'd been carrying since the auction block. "Do you ever regret it?" she said. "Choosing me?" Thomas didn't answer right away. He looked out across the land, across the fences held together by stubborn posts and the hard work of one day after another. "No," he said finally. "What I regret are the years I believed pain was mine alone to carry. I regret the moments I stayed silent when I should have stood up." He turned to face her. "But you? Never." Eliza leaned into him, feeling the truth of it settle around them like the evening itself. They were well into their years together by the time the story started spreading beyond Mercy Wells. People added flourishes and took liberties with the details. Some got it entirely wrong. Eliza let them. She knew the truth of it. It wasn't a dollar that had saved her. It was a choice, made and then remade every morning, through every hard night. On the anniversary of the auction, Thomas left nothing on the windowsill. Instead, he came and stood beside her in the early light, with 2 cups of coffee steaming between their hands. "Do you still think I'd regret choosing you?" he asked quietly. Eliza smiled, fierce, certain, unhurried. "No," she said. "I think we both regret waiting." The desert stretched wide and unforgiving and perfectly honest all around them, and within it stood 2 people who had been bought, broken, and counted as worthless. They had counted themselves instead, and that had made all the difference.